This article includes graphic images some readers may find disturbing. FBI agents are devoting substantial resources to a multi-state hunt for two baby piglets that the Bureau believes are named Lucy and Ethel. The two piglets were removed over the summer from the Circle 4 farm in Utah by animal rights activists who had entered the Smithfield Foods-owned factory farm to film the brutal, torturous conditions in which the pigs are bred in order to be slaughtered. While filming the conditions at the Smithfield facility, activists saw the two ailing baby piglets laying on the ground, visibly ill and near death, surrounded by the rotting corpses of dead piglets. One was swollen and barely able to stand, the other had been trampled and was covered in blood, said Wayne Xiang of Direct Action Everywhere DXE, which filmed the facility and performed the rescue. Due to various illnesses, he said, the piglets were unable to eat or digest food and were thus a fraction of the normal weight for piglets their age. Rather than leave the two piglets at Circle 4 farm to wait for an imminent and painful death, the DXE activists decided to rescue them. They carried them out of the pens where they had been suffering and took them to an animal sanctuary to be treated and nursed back to health. DXE photograph depicting piglets huddled up against their mothers at Smithfield-owned Circle 4 farm in Utah. DXE says the piglets were sick or starving. Photo Wayne Xiang's This single Smithfield Foods farm breeds and then slaughters more than 1 million pigs each year. One of the odd aspects of animal mistreatment in the U.S. is that species regarded as more intelligent and emotionally complex, dogs, dolphins, cats, primates, generally receive more public concern and more legal protection. Yet pigs, among the planet's most intelligent, social, and emotionally complicated species, capable of great joy, play, love, connection, suffering and pain, at least on a par with dogs, receive almost no protections, and are subject to savage systematic abuse by U.S. factory farms. At Smithfield, like most industrial pig farms, the abuse and torture primarily comes not from rogue employees violating company procedures. Instead, the cruelty is inherent in the procedures themselves. One of the most heinous industry-wide practices is one that DXE activists encountered in abundance at Circle 4 gestational crating. Where that technique is used, pigs are placed in a crate made of iron bars that is the exact length and width of their bodies, so they can do nothing for their entire lives but stand on a concrete floor, never turn around, never see any outdoors, never even see their tails, never move more than an inch. That was the condition in which the activists found the rotting piglet corpses and the two ailing piglets they rescued. Piles of dead and rotting piglets are piled up behind the sow, who is wedged into a crate so tightly that she cannot move away from the mess at Smithfield-owned Circle 4 farm in Utah. Photo Wayne Xiang's female pigs give birth in this condition. They are put in so-called farrowing crates when they give birth, and their piglets run underneath them to suckle and are often trampled to death. The sows are bred repeatedly this way until their fertility declines, at which point they are slaughtered and turned into meat. The pigs are so desperate to get out of their crates that they often spend weeks trying to bite through the iron bars until their gums gush blood, bash their heads against the walls, and suffer a disease in which their organs end up mangled in the wrong places, from the sheer physical trauma of trying to escape from a tiny space or from acute anxiety called organ torsion. So cruel is the practice that in 2014, Canada effectively banned its usage, as the European Union had done 2 years earlier. 9 U.S. states, most of which host very few farms, have banned gestational crating in 2014, New Jersey Gov. Chris Christie, with his eye on the GOP primary in farm-friendly Iowa, vetoed a bill that would have made his state the 10th. But in the U.S. states where factory farms actually thrive, these devices continue to be widely used, which means the vast majority of pigs in the U.S. are subjected to them. The suffering, pain, and death these crates routinely cause were in ample evidence at Smithfield Foods, as accounts, photos, and videos from DXE demonstrate. FBI raids animal sanctuaries under normal circumstances. A large industrial farming company such as Smithfield Foods would never notice that two sick piglets of the millions it breeds and then slaughters were missing. Nor would they care. A sick and dying piglet has no commercial value to them. Yet the rescue of these two particular piglets has literally become a federal case, by all appearances, a matter of great importance to the Department of Justice. On the last day of August, a 6-car armada of FBI agents in bulletproof vests, armed with search warrants, descended upon two small shelters for abandoned farm animals, Shing Farm Rescue in Riverton, Utah, and Love and Arms in Erie, Colorado. These sanctuaries have no connection to DXE or any other rescue groups. They simply serve as a shelter for sick, abandoned, or otherwise injured animals. Run by a small staff and a team of animal-loving volunteers, they are open to the public to teach about farm animals. The attachments to the search warrant specified that the FBI agents could take DNA samples, blood, hair follicles or ear clippings to be seized from swine with the following characteristics: eye pink, white coloring 2. Docktails 3. Approximately 5 to 9 months in age IV. Any swine with a hole in right ear. The FBI agents searched the premises of both shelters. They demanded DNA samples of 2 piglets they said were named Lucy and Ethel, in order to determine whether they were the 2 ailing piglets who had been rescued weeks earlier from Smithfield. A representative of Love and Arms, who insisted on anonymity due to fear of the pending criminal investigation, described the events. The FBI agents ordered staff and volunteers to stay away from the animals and then approached the piglets. To obtain the DNA samples, the state veterinarians accompanying the FBI used a snare to pressurize the piglet's snout, thus immobilizing her in pain and fear, and then cut off close to 2 inches of the piglet's ear. The piglet's pain was so severe, and her screams so piercing, that the sanctuary's staff members screamed and cried. Even the FBI agents were so sufficiently disturbed by the resulting trauma, that they directed the veterinarians not to subject the second piglet to the procedure. The sanctuary representative recounted that the piglet, who had part of her ear removed, spent weeks depressed and scared, barely moving or eating, and still has not fully recovered. The FBI receipt given to the sanctuaries shows they took DNA samples from swine. Several volunteers at one of the raided animal shelters said they were followed back to their homes by FBI agents, who dramatically questioned them in front of family members and neighbors. And there is even reason to believe that the Bureau has been surveilling the activists' private communications regarding the rescue of this piglet duo. The FBI specified as part of its search that it was seeking DNA samples from piglets they said were named Lucy and Ethel. But those were not the names the activists used when publicly discussing the rescue of the 2 piglets. In their videos about the rescue, they called the pair Lily and Lizzie. Lucy and Ethel were code names the activists used internally, suggesting that agents were surveilling the activists' communications, either electronically or through informants, in an effort to find the 2 piglets and build a criminal case against the group. Subsequent events confirmed that this show of FBI force was designed to intimidate the sanctuaries, which played no role in the rescue. Weeks after the FBI's execution of the 2 search warrants, Love and Arms, in the midst of an interview with The Intercept, received a telephone call from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, claiming the agency had received a complaint that the sanctuary lacked the legally required licenses for animal shelters that are open to the public. We had never had an FBI visit or a USDA call about licenses, and now suddenly, within weeks, both happened, the sanctuary representative said. A piglet that was ill and close to death at Smithfield recovers as she is cared for after being rescued. Photo Wayne Sheyoung's retaliation for exposing cruel treatment. What has vested these 2 piglets with such importance to the FBI is that their rescue is now part of what has become an increasingly visible public campaign by DXE and other activists to highlight the barbaric suffering and abuse that animals endure on farms like Circle 4. Obviously, the FBI and Smithfield, the nation's largest industrial farm corporation, don't really care about the missing piglets they are searching for. What they care about is the efficacy of a political campaign intent on showing the public how animals are abused at factory farms, and they are determined to intimidate those responsible. Deterring such campaigns and intimidating the activists behind them is, manifestly, the only goal here. What made this piglet rescue particularly intolerable was an article that appeared in the New York Times days after the rescue, which touted the use of virtual reality technology by animal rights activists to allow the public to immerse in the full experience of seeing what takes place in these companies' farms. The article featured a photograph of the DXE activists rescuing the piglets from the Smithfield farm. The Times article was published July 6. The search warrant against the sanctuaries was obtained the following month, in mid-August, and then executed on August 31. In the interim, the piglets had become stars of a clearly effective campaign against Smithfield Foods. In response to questions from The Intercept, Smithfield insisted that it does not abuse its animals, but, as is typical for factory farms, the company offered little more than generalized denials, accompanied by vague accusations that the videos and photos the activists took are somehow distorted. After they rescued the 2 piglets, the DXE activists did not try to hide what they had done, they did the opposite. They used a tactic known as open rescue, the purpose of which is to publicly detail what has been done to help the public understand the true nature of the abuses. The activists wrote about the rescue in social media postings that went viral, detailing the horrific conditions they witnessed at Smithfield and describing the suffering of the piglets. They posted videos to Facebook and YouTube that they filmed of the farm and the rescue as it happened, with other videos showing Lily and Lizzie being treated at the sanctuaries and growing into happy, playful, healthy adolescents. Video direct action everywhere. Plainly, the crime of these activists that has galvanized the FBI is not the theft of 2 dying piglets, it is political activism and investigative journalism, which exposes the cruelty and abuse at the heart of this powerful industry. In response to a few media reports on the FBI raids at the sanctuaries, Bureau spokesperson Sandra Barker told The Washington Post, "I can say that we were at the 2 locations conducting court-authorized activity related to an ongoing investigation. Because it's ongoing, I'm not able to provide any more details at this time." To an industry feeling endangered by growing public disgust over conditions at industrial farms, driven by scandals within the meat, pork, and poultry sectors, Lily and Lizzie are political and journalistic threats. Animals like them are vital for enabling animal rights activists to demonstrate to the public in a visceral, personalized way that this industry generates massive profit by monstrously and unnecessarily torturing living beings who are emotionally complex and experience great suffering. Rescued piglets Lizzie and Lily. Photo Wayne Chiunk's government power abuse to intimidate and punish activists. The Justice Department's grave attention to a case of 2 missing piglets reflects how vigilantly the U.S. government uses extreme measures to protect the agricultural industry, not from unjust economic loss, violent crime, or theft, but from political embarrassment and accurate reporting that damages the industry's reputation. A sweeping framework of draconian laws, designed to shield the industry from criticism and deter and punish its critics, has been enacted across the country by federal and state legislatures that are captive to the industry's high-paid lobbyists. The most notorious of these measures are the ag laws, which make publishing videos of farm conditions taken as part of undercover operations a felony, punishable by years in prison. Though many courts, including most recently a federal court in Utah, have struck down these laws as an unconstitutional assault on speech and press freedoms, they continue to be used in numerous states to harass and, in some cases, prosecute animal rights activists. As the Times article notes, these ag laws are one reason activists are forced to turn to virtual reality to show what really happens inside industrial farms without running the risk of prosecution. Many mother pigs had nipples that were torn into bloody shreds from feeding starving piglets. Photo Wayne Chiunk's even more extreme and menacing is the Federal Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. As I described previously when reporting on the arrest of 2 young activists, who faced 10 years in prison for freeing minks from farm cages before the animals could be sliced to death and turned into luxury coats, non-violent animal rights activists are often designated as terrorists under the AETA and are treated in the court system as such, even when no human beings are hurt and the economic loss is minimal, as is typical for lobbyist and industry-supported bills. The AETA passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. Its 2 prime Senate sponsors were James Inhofe, Rockler, and Dianne Feinstein, D. Califf, and then was signed into law by George W. Bush. This terrorism law is violated if one intentionally damages or causes the loss of any real or personal property, including animals or records used by an animal enterprise, for the purpose of damaging or interfering with its operations. If you do that, and note that only damage to property but not to humans is required, then you are guilty of domestic terrorism under the law. Prior to the 2006 enactment of the AETA, animal rights activism that damaged property was already illegal under a 1992 federal law, as well as various state laws, and subject to severe punishments. The primary purpose of the new 2006 law was to expand the scope of criminal offenses to include plainly protected forms of political protest, and to heighten the legal punishments and intensify social condemnation by literally labeling animal rights activists as domestic terrorists. The factory farm industry and its armies of lobbyists wield great influence in the halls of federal and state power, while animal rights activists wield virtually none. This imbalance has produced increasingly oppressive laws, accompanied by massive law enforcement resources devoted to punishing animal activists even for the most inconsequential non-violent infractions, as the FBI search warrant and raid in search of Lucy and Ethel illustrates. The U.S. government, of course, has always protected and served the interests of industry. Beginning when most of the nation was fed by small farms, federal agencies have been particularly protective of agricultural industry. That loyalty has only intensified as family farms have nearly disappeared, replaced by industrial factory farms where animals are viewed purely as commodities, instruments for profit, and treated with unconstrained cruelty. Downed pigs languish in their own feces at Smithfield Circle 4 farm in Utah. Photo Wayne Chiunks. Lately, opposition is emerging from unusual places. Utah federal judge Robert J. Shelby, an Obama appointee who is a lifelong Republican, recently struck down the state's ag law on First Amendment grounds, noting in his ruling for as long as farmers have put food on American tables, the government has endeavored to support and protect the agricultural industry. In short, governmental protection of the American agricultural industry is not new, and has taken a variety of forms over the last 200 years. What is new, however, is the recent spate of state laws that have assumed an altogether novel approach restricting speech related to agricultural operations. As Shelby detailed, those ag laws were not used until activists began having success in showing the public the true extent of cruelty that industrial farms impose on animals. Nobody was ever charged under these early ag laws, and for nearly 2 decades no new ag legislation was introduced. That changed, however, after a series of high-profile undercover investigations were made public in the mid to late 2000s. To name just a few, in 2007, an undercover investigator at the Westland Hallmark Meat Company in California filmed workers forcing sick cows, many unable to walk, into the kill box by repeatedly shocking them with electric prods, jabbing them in the eye, prodding them with a forklift, and spraying water up their noses. A 2009 investigation at Highline Hatchery in Iowa revealed hundreds of thousands of unwanted day-old male chicks being funneled by conveyor belt into a macerator to be ground up live. That same year, undercover investigators at a Vermont slaughterhouse operated by Bushway Packing obtained similarly gruesome footage of day-old calves being kicked, dragged, and skinned alive. A few years later, an undercover investigator at E6 Cattle Company in Texas filmed workers beating cows on the head with hammers and pickaxes and leaving them to die. And later that year, at Sparbo Farms in Iowa, undercover investigators documented hens with gaping, untreated wounds laying eggs in cramped conditions among decaying corpses. The publication of these and other undercover videos had devastating consequences for the agricultural facilities involved. The videos led to boycotts of facilities by McDonald's, Target, Sam's Club, and others. They led to bankruptcy and closure of facilities and criminal charges against employees and owners. They led to statewide ballot initiatives banning certain farming practices. And they led to the largest meat recall in United States history, a facility's entire 2 years' worth of production. Over the next 3 years, 16 states introduced ag legislation. In other words, both the legislative process and law enforcement agencies are being blatantly exploited, misused, to protect not the property rights but the reputational interests of this industry. Having the FBI, in the midst of real domestic terrorism threats, hurricane-ravaged communities, and intricate corporate criminality, send agents around the country to animal sanctuaries in search of DNA samples for 2 missing piglets may seem like overkill to the point of being laughable. But it is entirely unsurprising in the context of how law enforcement resources are used, and on whose behalf. A piglet at Smithfield Circle 4 farm in Utah. Photo Wayne Chiunks. Smithfield Foods defenses. It makes sense that Smithfield Foods would be petrified of the public learning of many of its practices. But in this particular case, they are specifically trying to hide the pure evils of gestational crates. This video, taken by an investigator with the Humane Society in 2012, shows the widespread but hideous reality of gestational crates at a Smithfield farm in response to the public controversy over this practice, generated by activists filming what was going on. Smithfield announced in 2012 that they would phase out gestational crating in 10 years, by 2022. They then claimed that by the end of 2017, they would transition completely to group housing systems, but as the DXE videos show, gestation crates are exactly what activists found in abundance when they visited Smithfield Circle 4. Indeed, when Wayne Chiunks and DXE visited Circle 4 over the summer, they saw no signs whatsoever of any construction or reform efforts to move away from gestational crates, Chiunks told The Intercept. As the videos show, Circle 4 had thousands of pigs suffering in such crates. That was where the activists found the 2 piglets, close to death. When Smithfield learned that The Intercept was reporting on these issues, a spokesperson emailed a statement and invited further questions. The statement claims that in response to DXC's reporting, Smithfield immediately launched an investigation and completed a third-party audit, and the audit results show no findings of animal mistreatment. This is a typical industry tactic when they claim, as they almost always do, that their paid auditors discovered no findings of animal mistreatment. What they mean is that there was no evidence that their employees engaged in activities that corporate procedures explicitly prohibit, such as beating the animals or administering electric shock. But what the audit does not do is ask whether the procedures themselves, such as gestational crating, are abusive and thus constitute mistreatment. Smithfield failed to provide a response to The Intercept's follow-up questions about what it does and does not mean when their auditors claim no mistreatment was discovered. The company simply reiterated that the animals observed on the farm by the audit team were in good condition, appeared comfortable, free of clinical disease, and showed no signs of fear or intimidation in the presence of people. Simply review the DXC video above, and the featured photos showing what they found at Circle 4, to judge for yourself. Cramped conditions lead to many pigs being trampled to death at Smithfield-owned Circle 4 farm in Utah. Photo Wayne Xiang's in its statement, Smithfield also accused the activists who rescued the 2 piglets of risking the life of the animals they stole and the lives of the animals living on our farms by trespassing, an odd claim from a company that plans to slaughter all of those same animals. When asked to specify how the activists endangered the lives of the sick animals they rescued, Smithfield told The Intercept that the video's creators violated Smithfield's strict biosecurity policy, which prevents the spread of disease on farms. The statement added the piglets were not extremely ill or on the verge of death. These piglets, along with other animals living on the farm, are well cared for throughout their lifetime. But in response, Xiang told The Intercept our activists use better biosecurity protocols than the company's own employees, as evidenced by the dead, rotting piglets on the farm. Allowing baby animals to rot to death is, in fact, a serious violation of biosecurity and food safety. Taking photographs of animal cruelty is not. Smithfield also accused the activists of manipulating their film, claiming that the video appears to be highly edited and even staged in an attempt to manufacture an animal care issue where one does not exist. But Smithfield did not respond to this question from The Intercept about the staging allegation. How would these activists stage hundreds of pigs in gestation crates and dozens of piglets rotting to death, all in virtual reality? No less. It would take a Hollywood blockbuster budget and the most sophisticated team of computer-generated imagery for that. What's Smithfield's theory about what they fabricated in this video? The only specific Smithfield offered was the assertion that based on the review of animal care experts, it appears piglets were moved from one section of the barn to another to support the inaccuracies and falsehoods described in the video by its creators. But Xiang said the video speaks for itself. I don't know how we can fake a rotting piglet. Regarding the accusation that they moved piglets, he added, I imagine what they are seeing is piglets in the wrong sort of pen, gestation rather than farrowing. But that is a testament to their own failed animal care practices. We were shocked and horrified, as well, to see piglets born and housed in inappropriate conditions that left them exposed to trauma. In sum, the industry has long responded to these videos, which they tried in the first instance to use their lobbying power to criminalize, by insisting that the videos are distorted. Yet they never specify what these supposed distortions are. Now that activists are using virtual reality technology, which allows the viewer to see everything the activists see, such claims are even more untenable than they were before. A rescued piglet, named Lily, recovers under a blanket. Photo Wayne Xiang's revolving door with agribusiness. A recent change in U.S. political discourse, spurred by events such as the 2008 financial crisis, the Occupy movement, and the Bernie Sanders presidential campaign, is the increasingly common use of the words oligarchy and plutocracy to describe the country's political system. Though dramatic, the terms, melded together, describe a fairly simple and common state of affairs: power exerted by and exercised for the exclusive benefit of a small group of people who wield the greatest financial power. It is hard to imagine a more vivid illustration than watching FBI agents don bulletproof vests and execute DNS search warrants for Lily and Lizzie, all to deter and intimidate critics of a savage industry that funds politicians and the lobbyists that direct them. Substantial attention has been paid over the last several years to the revolving door that runs Washington, industry executives being brought in to run the agencies that regulate their industries, followed by them returning to that industry once their industry-serving government work is done. That's how Wall Street barons come to regulate banks, how factory owners come to regulate workplace safety laws, how oil executives come to regulate environmental protections, only to leave the public sector and return back to lavish rewards from those same industries for a job well done. Though it receives modest attention, this revolving door spins faster, and in more blatantly sleazy ways, when it comes to the USDA and its mandate to safeguard animal welfare. The USDA is typically dominated by executives from the very factory farm industries that are most in need of vibrant regulation. For that reason, animal welfare laws are woefully inadequate, but the ways in which they are enforced is typically little more than a bad joke. Industrial farming corporations like Smithfield know they can get away with any abuse or mislabeling deceits such as misleading claims about their treatment of animals because the officials who have been vested with the sole authority to enforce these laws, federal USDA officials, are so captive to their industry. Courts have repeatedly ruled that private individuals, animal rights groups, and even state authorities have no right to sue to enforce animal welfare laws, because the exclusive authority lies with the U.S. government, which has no real interest in actually enforcing those laws. Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue on July 12, 2017, in Atlanta. Photo Bob Andres Atlanta Journal-Constitution Apth Current Secretary of Agriculture, former Georgia Gov. Sonny Perdue pictured, right, is just one example, but he vividly highlights the revolving door form of legalized corruption that dominates this industry. Perdue was raised on a Georgia row farm and obtained his doctorate in veterinary medicine. Despite those seemingly benign credentials, the factory farm industry celebrated the news of his nomination by President Donald Trump. The National Chicken Council, for instance, demanded that he be confirmed expeditiously. The enthusiasm was for good reason. Georgia was pretty friendly to food industry interests during Perdue's 2 terms, Grub Street reported, and Perdue took about $330,000 in contributions from Monsanto and other agri-businesses for his campaigns. In 2009, the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, the lobbying group for genetically modified foods, named Perdue its Governor of the Year because, it said, he has been a stalwart advocate of the biosciences in Georgia and truly understands the promise of our industry. As Georgia governor, Perdue supported the rapid expansion of factory farm giant Perdue Farms, to which he has no familial relation, with its long history of allegations of animal abuse. And Perdue has extensive ties to the agri-business sector he is now supposed to oversee and regulate. The firm of which he is the founding partner and his family owns and runs, Perdue Partners LLC, is an agribusiness at the heart of this industry. After being confirmed, Perdue wasted little time lavishing his agribusiness industry with gifts. In February, the USDA abruptly removed inspection reports and other information from its website about the treatment of animals at thousands of research laboratories, zoos, dog breeding operations and other facilities, reported The Washington Post. Then, 2 senators who have received large sums from farmers and ranchers, Democrat Debbie Stabenow and Republican Pat Roberts, agitated for the recession of the Obama administration's mild regulations on organic eggs, designed to improve conditions for chickens, and the Perdue USDA put the new standard on hold and suggested that it might even be withdrawn, in sum, with industry insiders dominating the sole agency USDA with the authority to regulate factory farms. Animals that are captive, abused, tortured, and slaughtered en masse have little chance, even when it comes to just applying existing laws with a minimal amount of diligence. The politics of the U.S., including the fact that a key farm state, Iowa, plays such a central role in presidential elections, means there are massive forces arrayed behind factory farms, and very few in support of animal welfare. Piglets are raised in cramped, filthy conditions at Smithfield Circle 4 Farm in Utah. Photo Wayne Shiunks.